Hey everybody, welcome to tonight's late night happy hour here on ESPN Los Angeles. Whoa, could you see that thing? It's like a bird. There's a fly that came in my house today that I swear to God is like a bird. It's the same size. It's a gigantic fly or a small bird. But anyway, it's Brian Kamenetzky, Andy Kamenetzky, and joining us from our center rectangle, Darius Soriano. You know him from Foreign Blue and Gold. He's mostly there now. Yes, there he is.
Yes, here I am.
Centered beautifully in the screen. Darius, how are you? Good to see you.
Damn pro.
I am good.
Christ,
I'm good. Thanks for thinking of me to bring me on. I'm not sure how I will follow Vic from last night. She had a great appearance, so
She was phenomenal.
She was awesome.
She was fantastic. How by the way, you're up north, I believe, Oakland, correct?
I am in Oakland, Bay Area.
How are the flies up there compared to what Brian's dealing with right now? Do you have bird-like flies up north in the Bay Area?
I do, but I'm able to kill them pretty easily. So if you need some help, let me know.
I need a shotgun. It's wearing pants. It's huge.
I hear chopsticks work.
Oh gosh, that would be so cool. Apparently it was just a fly on like they did that. Apparently it was just a fly on a string, is my understanding, when they actually filmed it. They did not actually do that in real life. We have a lot to talk about, Darius. Not only the best way to get your liquor delivered right to your door, which is vsliquor.com, of course, but also I know you are a guy, from following you on social media and the chances we've had to talk, you're a person who appreciates and enjoys food.
I do.
And there are many times when I have seen your Twitter feed and looked at like look at what I just made humble brag thing of like, okay, I want that and I can't have any, and it's very annoying. So this was the thing that was taking sort of Twitter by storm as we were going on air. Did you guys see this?
Yeah, I did.
Darius, did you see this?
I did not. Is that a Rice Krispie treat?
It is a Rice Krispie treat of some sort. Do you care to guess what kind of Rice Krispie treat it is?
A hot dog?
It is a hot dog Rice Krispie treat. It is a hot dog Rice Krispie treat. Now, the question becomes...
With ketchup, mustard, and relish.
Now, I know how Andy feels about this, but for very specific reasons. So, I want to ask you...
I hate hot dogs.
Hot dog phobia. Right.
And I have taste.
Like and you hate ketchup.
Expression.
You have a ketchup phobia.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there that doesn't work for me.
This is like if you brought this tray of food by next to Andy, it would scare the crap out of him. So let me bring this back up, Darius. I will ask you, is this disgusting? Would you eat it?
It is disgusting. I would not eat that.
No. That is gross. Like, it's gross, but here's the thing, too. It's trying too hard.
Oh, it's definitely trying too hard.
That's, like, there is a fine line when it comes to fusing, either different, ethnicities of food, different cultures, different, salty, sweet, all that stuff. There's a fine line between interesting fusion and just trying too damn hard. That is trying way too damn hard. And the reason is there is no logical explanation for that. Like, other than just...
No, it's grotesque.
It's
absolutely 100% grotesque. Now, am I a terrible person, though? Because while I absolutely will say that it's grotesque, as soon as everybody leaves the room, I'm going to take a bite. What does that say? Because, like, I've always had a theory that if you make something like that, if somebody makes that and sort of insists that it's a thing or whatever, it's probably, like, am I missing something? It's probably pretty good. Like, it's sort of sweet and salty, and you could substitute a sausage in there, Andy, and hold the ketchup. Sweet, salty, crunchy. No. Like, is there even a small possibility that could be decent?
I'm guessing no. I'm guessing no.
Because again, there's no reason to do it. Like, anything that you want to experiment, there's got to be a reason that you would at least attempt to put these seemingly incongruent foods together. If your reason is just, let's see what would happen, then you know what? Go back to something new. Like, if that's only your reason of, let's see what it would taste like. Do better. Like,
Where's that from?
I
Nerdist.
saw it on Nerdist.
Yeah.
Okay,
No.
I just wanted to ask because I am the type of person for whom this sort of gimmicky food was invented, and I just wanted to see if anybody was coming along.
There's
with
no
me,
such thing
and
as
the
trying
answer-
too hard for you.
No,
There's no such
no, I will try. I will eat that.
So I'm also not one of those people who would eat, like, you know how they make those hamburgers and instead of buns, it's like 2 Krispy Kreme donuts. I'm not
Yeah.
one of those people
Oh, I
either.
would try that.
Right?
I wouldn't eat a whole one because if I had like 8 stents in my heart, but I would eat a bite.
Sure.
And if I had unlimited money, I would be like, oh, that's $16 at Dodger Stadium, but I'm going to buy it anyway, and I'll take like 3 bites and I'll give the rest to charity or something. I don't know, but I will want to taste.
Charity
that.
is taking your half-eaten donut burger.
Look, I mean, beggars,
Who's
beggars,
taking that?
beggars can't be choosers, Andy.
That's. I mean, honestly,
Isn't
that
that literally what we're talking about in this situation?
feels like you are trolling the people that you're supposedly.
Okay, I'm
being
not
charitable
going to
towards.
give
Like,
my
I'm looking
half-eaten
down
food
on
to charity, Andy. I mean, I think we've established that I'm not a good person on this show many times, but I'm not giving my half-eaten donut burger to charity. But I am
Now-
the person for whom it was invented.
Now, Darius, though, what are some of the things, though? Because I would say that your Twitter account doubles as food porn. I mean, maybe not doubles, but certainly can be about 1/10 of the time. It
Sure.
will serve as food porn. Like, what's some of your go-to, or in terms of things you love to show off the most?
You know, it's interesting. Most of the times I'm just cooking for my family. And so, and I like to eat good. So I just try to make the best thing that I can. I love to grill. And so if there's some good grilling to be done, let's show off some ribs or,
Oh yeah.
let's make a mac and cheese. I make a good eggplant parm or a chicken parm.
What is your secret with the eggplant? I cannot, for the life of me, make eggplant work. I find eggplant so difficult to cook.
I'm curious, because I have an idea here. Go first.
So I actually do all the pre-prep, the breading and all of that. And I used to like pan fry it, but it would get a little oily. So now I bake it really hot. I put some olive oil down on the bottom and sprinkle it over the top. And I bake it at like 425, 450 for like, I don't know, 20 minutes or so. And then I make a sauce.
I gotta say, it didn't sound like a lot of secrets, Andy. It just sounds
I don't know
you
why.
can't make eggplant.
It may just
It's
be
just
me.
a lot of water.
May-
I feel like if you can you got to pull some of the moisture out of it before. I also like really cooked eggplant. Like I like it to be like almost like a paste almost when I'm done with it. I don't like toothy eggplant. So I you got to pull some moisture out of it. So a little salt does that, or bake it down a little bit before you put all the other stuff on it and bread it and whatever, and then it won't be quite so watery.
Yeah, you could definitely salt it and put it on one of those like drying racks that you put like cookies on.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I just
it.
struggle with eggplant for some reason, and I don't know why. And I love making eggplant, but I love eating eggplant, but I never actually eat it. Because I cook a lot at home, and because I can't make it, and for whatever reason, my wife struggles with eggplant too. Like we never eat it, even though we both actually really like it.
Yeah. I do feel like, Darius, if you ever started a band, Let's Make a Mac and Cheese is the name of your first album. Like that's a great name for an album, and I would totally buy that album and I would listen to it. Later on in as Andy mentioned, your Twitter handle does kind of double as food porn. Later in the show, we will find out which of your social media feeds doubles as actual porn, but that's for later in the hour.
Talk about a tease.
I know. We gotta keep. You have a podcast. It's hard to keep people through the entire time. You got to figure out ways to do it.
And after the break,
what have you been making of the NBA since it came back? Like, what has your viewing experience been? How much have you been able to get into it? I know you got a family, kids. Like, this is the first question before we even talk about the Lakers that I always think is interesting. Is just how are you taking it in? Are you 100% watching every scrimmage? What are you doing?
I've been watching the Lakers scrimmages the best that I can. Mm-hmm. I did tune into the first day of games before the Lakers played. So that was last Wednesday, I think, is when the first game started.
So? Yeah.
I caught some of the Clippers game, I think. I was watching some of the Bucks game. It's actually better than what I thought it was going to be from a TV perspective and from a presentation perspective. I thought that they've done a good job just in terms of framing everything out and making the gym seem like it's lively enough. The faces in the background can be a little bit too much at times, but I like the overall flow, and I thought I think the basketball has actually been better than what I expected as well. So all of it has been good, and it's been welcome to have, sports back. I'm not necessarily a baseball guy or a golf guy, so I know there's been stuff that's been going on before this. So to get basketball back and to see it played at a legitimate level, even though the games haven't, meant anything per se.
Right.
It's been exciting for me, at least.
I don't actually, I gotta say, I was a little skeptical with, how the attempts to represent people in these games would actually be, whether you're talking about crowd noise, whether you're talking about, the hologram fans as opposed to the cardboard cutouts that they're doing in baseball. My general feeling is once you start getting used enough to it where you're not actually thinking about it at all, I think you reach a point where unless you are determined to actually allow yourself to be taken out of it, you're going to forget about it. I think it's ultimately going to be way weirder for the players for however long it takes them to get used to it than the actual television experience. So far, it's taken me a couple innings in baseball or a quarter at the most, and then I just forget about it. Maybe I'm just happy to see the actual sports back, or, maybe I'm just realizing I never paid attention to the crowd and all that stuff in the first place.
I think piping in the crowd noise has been interesting. I actually like when there's not a lot of noise and you hear the sneakers squeak and all of that. Right. As someone who's played a bunch of pickup basketball and played low-level hoops and has been in sort of empty gyms, that sound sort of actually brings me in more. And it makes me focus even more on what's going on the court, right? I don't know if you heard JJ Redick talk about the aspect of what it's like to play in an empty gym, though, because he was talking about that the disconnect from what the fan experience has generally been, like what you've been describing and what I've been talking about, is quite different than what it's like for the players, where he was talking about how it felt like they were playing on a stage, like a sound stage or on a movie set.
It really looks like that.
Like a green screen?
It does, with the way the video boards are closed in and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's not a bad look, but it is so much. It's different even than playing in a regular gym. It does have that kind of set quality to it that it's almost like a made up thing. But it's funny, baseball, I feel because of the way I watch, I kind of need those cues because I'm not staring at the screen the entire time when I'm watching a baseball game. But basketball, it's not the same thing. I agree with you. It's to be able to hear the defensive calls. I can live with the profanity, of which there is a tremendous amount if you really get the microphones down there. I mean, I don't care. I can explain it to my kids. I'm not worried about that stuff. But for the other, I would love to hear, but I get why they're doing it that way, because it does kind of normalize the experience, and it basically just feels like they're playing on like an NBA game played on a neutral court. And then I kind of like how all the players are often they're almost like in softball dugouts, where they're all they're like a rock and jock game. All the dudes are in pens or something.
They feel like a part of the crowd almost, right? So that's right. Part of what I've really appreciated about it as well is I feel like the players are really trying to get into it themselves in order to bring the energy that the crowd would normally bring, right? And I think that they're doing it for themselves. I think they're doing it for their teammates and to sort of replicate whatever they can that let's get each other hyped. And the Lakers bench has been like that all season. And
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah, so they've really been bringing that energy, and I feel like it's helped them in these scrimmages.
Well, this is something Brian and I talked a lot about heading into the bubble. You know, when we're still trying to figure out exactly what it was going to be like and how the players were going to react to being there. And so far, it seems like, you know, generally speaking, the players have reacted pretty well. And specifically speaking, the Lakers have actually reacted quite well. And one of the things that it felt like the Lakers were going to have as an advantage that, you know, other teams may have, may not have. I mean, there's no other team that I'm around as much to really know this. But the idea that they genuinely like being around each other and genuinely like spending time with each other is a major advantage in this scenario where, you know, hopefully you're going to be there through mid-October. You know how easy it is going to get sick of each other? Like to just like want a break from each other. And all season, these guys have enjoyed being around each other in ways that I don't think you can fake. I mean, like, you know, LeBron was good in Trainwreck. He's not that good of an actor.
That's
you know,
right.
like I don't trust the rest of these guys to be able to fake what I've been seeing during games, during practice, in the locker room. I mean, I've been around teams that like each other. I've been around teams that can't stand each other. So I think I'm reasonably good at figuring out which is which and figuring out, because I've seen teams try to fake it where it's been obvious they're lying. This team really likes being around each other.
Or they're, like I said, or they're faking it. I don't, you know.
Exceptionally well.
Well, I was going to say, too, that think back to the Lakers have been through a lot this season. And, you know, and it started with that trip to China.
Yeah.
And if there was anything that was going to prep them for what it was going to be like in sort of this bubble environment where they were sort of in lockdown and only had the ability to be around each other, I would say that China trip was pretty close to that, right? Because they went over there was all that, you know, like the political stuff. And when you listen to the players, Jared Dudley has talked about this at length, but they were basically captive in their hotels. Like they couldn't leave. They weren't necessarily sure how safe things were going to be. And they talked about how that part of the season and it being so early in the year really started that bonding process for them. And now they're in Orlando, and while they're not in China and there's more freedom of movement and the campus and being able to go outside and talk to a bunch of other people, they are still sort of stuck, but they're stuck with each other in a very similar way. And I do think that the camaraderie that this team has built up over the course of the year through all that they've dealt with, that it will pay dividends for them in Orlando. Not necessarily now, but just like you were saying, in what's it going to be like a month from now or 2 months from now?
What I think is fascinating about this is, you know, Andy and I have this argument all the time, you know, chemistry, how much does it matter? You know, people argue about intangibles all the time. I think they exist, but I think, you know, we sometimes, because the storylines around intangibles are much more engaging than the ones that are just about like who's good and who's not. Tangibles matter more. It's like you can't intangible your way to a title, but this tournament has so much of that, because how does not traveling impact LeBron's performance in the playoffs? The Lakers are incredibly LeBron dependent. So if he doesn't have to go anywhere, what does that mean? So, okay, there's that. What is, you know, Caruso and Kuzma not having to deal with hostile road crowds in their first playoffs? That's an intangible. Like, I don't know what that means. I can't quantify that. How does the fact that the Lakers like each other, how do you quantify that? This to me, Darius, is like the most intangible heavy playoffs that I've ever thought of since I've been covering basketball, at the very least.
You know, I have not thought about it within that within that context. I think those are great points. And I do think,
hold on a second, I need a pen.
and I do think that that's going to matter And I do think that other teams can use this stuff to their advantage as well, right? Like the Lakers are not alone in some of this stuff. Like you look at a team like the Bucks, I think that they're also a high chemistry, high character team. You know, they've got actual family like on the same team.
Are you kidding? The Lopi, they're not going to leave. Even if the Bucks get bounced early, they're sticking around the bubble. Like I promise they're going to be there through mid-October.
They're just going to go to their house that's on the property.
That's
right.
Well, the problem is, though, they've got to figure out a way to get in and out. Like, they're going to stay in the bubble. Like, maybe they'll have their family or whoever's around them do the quarantine to eventually join them. But you will not be able to pry Brooke and Robin out of that place. Like, they may stay after the basketball actually ends. Like, you're going to have to look around and make sure that they actually left. Like, this is paradise for those guys.
They're loving it. They're just not going to give up their credentials or anything like. They're going to purposely miss. They're going to miss the bus ride out. They're going to miss. It's going to be like Home Alone.
It's Home Alone, except Macaulay left himself there. Like it was intentional. Yeah. Like you're going to see Budenholzer like it's going to be the opposite, where they purposely snuck themselves into the place and everyone else just assumed they were there.
Yeah. But to get back to the point too about just all of the intangibles, like I am a person that thinks that those things matter to a degree that can't really be measured in a real way, and if those things are strong enough that they can put you over the top, all things being equal. And I do think the Lakers are well positioned from a chemistry standpoint, from a standpoint of having real leadership, right? Like when I think of LeBron James, I'm not sure if there's any other player in the league that I would want more to be leading a team through this environment than LeBron, right? Well, not only from his championship experience, but just from how he's positioned himself as a leader over this second half of his career, and to now have a bunch of guys who you can tell have sort of bought into the culture of this team and really do look to him as sort of that guidepost, right? That stuff like that is going to make a difference. And I do think that the Lakers now can lean on intangibles in a way that maybe other teams can't.
Part of the argument that Brian and I always have about chemistry is just like, or the debate of the value of it is my main thing, and Brian actually agrees with me on this, but this is something that I've just always felt about in terms of defining chemistry or like the value of it. I think where it really comes out isn't when things are going well in terms of like adding on to it, but how you can get yourself out of it when things aren't going well. I think that's actually where the chemistry really shines through and really reveals itself is, okay, things aren't going well and you have to start really being there for each other. How willing are you to do that? And when you look at a season like the Lakers have had this year, where there has been so much like real life adversity. I mean, like they've been, the play itself, like on the court, hasn't offered a ton of adversity, but the context of this season has offered like some adversity that's unprecedented, everything they've been through. And I think that's where you really see the value of that chemistry because it's never really thrown them off course at all.
It's never been, it's not like a bad thing to have good team chemistry. It's just, I've been around a lot of bad teams that all seem to get along. They just aren't very good. It's one of these things where like the Lakers don't have so much of what the Lakers, and you can tell me if you disagree, Darius, so much of the Lakers' chances is basically just built around how good is LeBron. And then secondarily, how good is AD with LeBron? Where the Clippers, it's like, well, they can use this lineup and that one. And the Bucks have some versatility and all the, it boils down to a couple things. So anything where there is an intangible and it kind of seems like it might favor the Lakers is a bigger boost to them than it might be to another team. And I feel like all of those little intangible things about the realities of the Orlando bubble versus others. Yeah, the Lakers get energy from their home crowd. You know what? They don't rely on it nearly as much as the Nuggets do or the Bucks do. Like it's more important for those teams to be at home than it is for the Lakers. And so like that kind of thing, all of these little things point to the Lakers, which is good because I'm not sure they're the best team talent-wise.
Yeah. I'm not sure they're the best team. I do think, though, that in any given game, they're likely to have two of the best three players.
Yes, most games.
Right? And when that – and the NBA or sports in general, right, and it's cliche as hell to say this, but the NBA is a talent league, and it's a talent league both on the court and off it to a certain extent in terms of coaching and all of that as well, right? And I think both those sides can elevate each other. I think great players can elevate a coach, and I think a great coach can elevate players as well. But when you're talking about LeBron and AD, those guys are both very likely to make first-team All-NBA this season. They're basically positioned as two of the top 5 or 6 players in the entire league. And to go into any playoff series and any given game within that series, having those two guys and the types of complementary role players that the team has as well, they may not be 1 through 10 the most talented team, but at the top of that, they're most certainly the most talented with LeBron and AD combined. And then with the role players that they do have, I think that from a talent standpoint, they're right there with the Bucks and the Clippers. You might say, or not you guys specifically, but analysis might say, well, the Clippers have more depth here, and they've got Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell. They've got these other depth pieces. But look, I'll throw a Danny Green and a KCP and a Dwight Howard and now what we're seeing potentially with Dion Waiters, and then you start to add Alex Caruso and Kyle Kuzma and Markieff Morris. Like when you look at what the Lakers have depth-wise 1 through 10, they're not slouching to anyone.
Oh no, they're not bad. We're trying to distinguish between, if you got to pick between the Clippers and the Bucks, and I don't know if you'd put a top end Philly, if the Simmons experiment works in the way that they want, and they're suddenly become, of those 3 or 4 teams, like trying to handicap it is tricky. So it's like you're looking, Andy, for I think any little difference.
Well, I think what might make either some Laker fans nervous or might make some analysts a little bit skeptical with the Lakers, or relatively skeptical, because there aren't really anybody who thinks at minimum they can't get to the Western Conference Finals. But the idea of the depth that the Lakers have, you can believe in it, but you also might think that they need to be more towards the top of what they can do to really elevate the Lakers. Like you need Danny Green towards the top of what he can do. You need KCP towards the top, Caruso towards
Toronto,
the top.
Danny Green versus what he's been a lot of this year.
Right, as opposed to, say, like we were talking about before, the Clippers, like Patrick Beverley, a step below what we've seen from Patrick Beverley, you might believe in a little bit more than KCP, a step below his best. Or the same thing could be said about Lou Williams or Montrezl Harrell. I mean, those are two guys in the they've been in the running the last couple of years for 6th Man of the Year. Or, Eric Bledsoe, Bledsoe might not be a great example because he's got a terrible history in the playoffs, but when Eric Bledsoe is sort of playing at his average, you might think that that's better than KCP at his averages. So it's just the idea of, okay, which version of these guys are going to show up, and then what's the discrepancy, if any, against the role players they're going to be matched up against?
Well, the interesting thing to me about a lot of the Lakers players, their role players especially, is they can run so hot and cold. And I think it's that variance in their performance that I think should concern fans if they're looking at a place where there would be, real questions about what their top ceiling is, right? Because if Danny Green, all you need is 2 or 3 of those guys to not have, or to have one of those games where, oh wow, all those guys are 2 for 6, or or 3 for 9, and all you have is LeBron and AD, that's going to go poorly. And just like the opposite is true if you have Danny Green and KCP and Kuzma, if they all shoot 50 or 60% in a game or over the course of the series,
you don't lose. If they have a game like they had in the scrimmage the other day where Kuzma's 5 of 6 from 3, they're going to win that game. But like I went back and I looked at this for the Athletic. You can win in a lot of different ways, and obviously it's never quite apples to apples because no team has LeBron and AD at the top of their roster. It's like it is hard to figure out what that is when you have 2 of the 5 best players in the league and nobody else does. I mean, if you have Clay, Steph, and KD, you win a title. Like that's kind of it.
I was going to say, like, there aren't many examples of teams that have had 2 of the top 5 players because that just doesn't happen very often.
Right.
But when we've seen it, like Steph and Durant, when you've seen it with Kobe and Shaq, if you want to make that argument for LeBron and Wade, and if it wasn't 2 of the top 5, you're talking top 7. I mean, peak Dwayne Wade or, slightly below peak Dwayne Wade.
Right up there.
But those teams lose.
The Warriors did. The Warriors did manage to lose when they didn't have KD. It's like when your third guy is Clay, you're going to win. When your fourth guy is Draymond, you're going to win.
Yeah.
And so the Lakers would be doing this with a little bit of a different formula, where the drop off between 2 and 3, even go back to the year that that Cleveland won, in when they beat the Warriors, Kyrie was great. LeBron was otherworldly. Love sucked in the finals, but was actually pretty good in the playoffs up to that point. He just had a bad finals. Last year, Toronto didn't have the peak second guy. Siakam, I think, was averaging at like 19 points a game or something like that. But they also had Van Vliet and they had Kyle Lowry. They had guys who had averaged 20 points a game during their career. People that you had to pay attention to. So even if they're not at that level anymore, they were at one point. The Lakers don't even have that. They don't have a guy who was a former 20-point-a-night scorer.
Right.
No, but
that's it.
Right, but like nobody would recommend let's play through Dwight for the next 15 minutes.
The comp that this Lakers team needs to actually look at is more in line with the early 2000s Lakers.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where the drop-off after Kobe and Shaq was massive, but what you had was a group of veteran, experienced players who could call on their skill and could call on what they were good at in big and pressure moments and perform. And I think that I think that Danny Green is one of those guys. To a certain extent, I actually think that like Dwight Howard could be one of those guys. I think that Alex Caruso, while unproven, is sort of that steady type of player that isn't going to have too many highs and too many lows.
He doesn't make a lot of mistakes.
Yes, exactly.
Caruso does not make many mistakes when he's on the court. Even if he doesn't shine, he doesn't screw up.
And so then you need to look at, all right, is KCP going to be able to play at a consistent level that's at his average or a little bit above? Or even look at the 2009, 2010 Lakers, right, where it was Kobe and Powell. And then you had Lamar and you had Bynum, but everything was centered really around their 2 stars. The way that you actually end up winning series, though, is because Trevor Ariza gets hot over the course of 2 or 3 series. Lamar Odom decides, right?
That's critical.
And those types of performances, I think the Lakers have players who are capable of playing to that level. It's just a matter of, in this environment and at these stakes, are they going to be able to call on it? And that's a fair question, but I think that that's a fair question for pretty much every other team in the league. You're going to have those same questions, I feel like, about a Landry Shamet or an Ivica Zubac or
right, but those guys are way further down the list. It's like, in theory, you don't, you have, assuming Trez eventually makes his way back into the bubble. But you have, Paul George, I guess, who has some lingering questions, but Kawhi and Paul George, and then you've got Lou, you've got Trez, you've got some guys with it. So like Landry Shamet just needs, if you get 2 or 3 good games out of Landry Shamet, you're okay. But like you got me looking this up, and I'm trying to figure is there my theory is I don't know who it's going to be, but at the end of the playoffs, if the Lakers win, we'll look back on it and say, okay, whether it's series to series or something, that guy did something that they don't normally do, was 3 or 4 points a game better for 6 games.
Western Conference Finals, Game 7, Portland, Brian Shaw. I mean, like, Brian Shaw was a huge catalyst in that game, getting the Lakers back into it. Brian Shaw was a scrap heap pickup for that team. And I know he wasn't, a guy out of the rotation the whole year. He played, but like Brian Shaw was only available because, ironically, Portland cut him. Yeah, there was a great joke. I don't remember what writer said it or where it was from that I read it, but somebody from Portland was like, and they were picking up part of his salary, and they're like, we're paying Brian Shaw right now to beat us and to knock us out of the playoffs. Right,
so let me ask you this: so second leading scorer in 2001 was Kobe. Third leading scorer I'm talking in the playoffs, was Fish. What was the gap between them?
I would bet it was like 18 point difference.
No, I don't think it's that high. My guess is because Fisher actually had a really good playoffs in 2001.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna guess it was about a 9-point gap.
It was 16.
Like I said, Darius was close. 18. It was that big?
What did he average? 12 or 11?
13 and a half. 13. And then Rick Fox was at 10. And then it was Horace Grant at 6, or 5. And so now, and I'm looking at...
I didn't think Kobe averaged almost 30. I guess that's what it was.
2000, the gap isn't as big. I'm literally just looking these things. This is, I'm sure, great programming. But I'm, me looking things up as we talk. The 2000 team, it wasn't as big, only because Kobe only averaged 20 points a game, but Glenn Rice was at 12 and a half. Yeah. So, but they had more, I don't know. I mean, but does that work now? Can you do it this way now? You could do it that way then.
I'll be very interested to see if it's more by committee than if it's just one guy who sort of has an outlier 20-game performance during the playoffs. And I think that this speaks to both sort of that variance that I was talking about earlier with some of the Lakers players, but also the fact that they've got a lot of these guys now, right? And so you mentioned Kyle Kuzma, and if he goes 5 for 7 from 3 one night. So the number of Lakers that can actually go 4 for 6 or 5 for 7 or have just one of those big scoring nights, that's Kuzma can do that. Mm-hmm. Danny Green can do that. KCP can do that. I think even Markieff Morris can do that a little bit. Dion Waiters can do that. If J.R. Smith, if he has a hot shift and gets a second shift based off of how he plays, he could do that. And it's very interesting to me that this is where Vogel, and I wrote about this earlier during the year at Forum Blue and Gold, that Vogel's played a lot of role player roulette this year. And he sort of used the early part of the game to feel out who had it going that night, what player combinations were working, and then found a way to close games with a lineup that was going to be able to get a win. And he's got a lot of different pieces now with the guys who are in the bubble that he can call on to make a difference. And if it's 2 or 3 of those guys, then he's going to have an opportunity to win a lot of playoff games based off the strength that he has. LeBron and Anthony Davis, and tonight it's Kyle Kuzma. The next night it could be Danny Green.
But the problem with that is you got to pick the right guy. And that's where it gets really tricky. And so I just for kicks, 2001 it was 16 points. In 2009,
I really forgot that
in
Kobe averaged
2009,
almost 30.
I know. In 2009, the Lakers had 4 guys who averaged double digits throughout the playoffs. 2010, they had 4 guys. Lamar was 0.3 of a point. They basically had 5 guys averaging double digits. So they had a lot of balance there, if not a clear third producer. But I just this is one of the things that fascinates me about this team, because it is so much just like, yeah, LeBron is that good. Like it's not like he has, the track record says LeBron is that good and can make up the gaps in these things and make Danny Green good and make Avery Bradley, or not Avery Bradley, but you guys get it. I keep using the word. I'm just fascinated by how this is going to play out.
I'm very interested in LeBron's focus, not only the entire season, but especially right now with the restart. He seems as driven and as focused as I've seen him maybe in the last 5 or 6 seasons in terms of where he's at mentally and how seriously he's taking the goal at hand, while also deftly sort of playing his cards in a way where he is also being a jokester at times and keeping it light. And I think he really has his finger on the pulse of this particular team in a way that bodes well for him and for the rest of the squad, just from a leadership and from a production standpoint.
Look, as connected as LeBron is this year, and I've written a lot over the course of the year for The Athletic, or talked about it a lot on air, like, his leadership this season has been, I think, phenomenal.
It's been great.
He's been an absolutely phenomenal leader for this team this year in a season where there's been a lot of stuff he's had to guide this team through, like we talked about earlier, that's legit hard. Like that has nothing to do with basketball. But also, too, we really recognize how good of a leader he's been this year because, to be perfectly honest, he wasn't last year.
That's right.
He was outwardly disconnected from the team pretty much from the jump, but certainly once the season got going, he clearly lost either interest or confidence or whatever it was with the team that year. He didn't seem to be even putting his arms around the franchise. Like, there was some type of buffer. And what I think getting Anthony Davis was great for LeBron, not just because it reinvigorated him in terms of his enthusiasm and, recognizing what he had, in a running mate, a guy that's, he's not at LeBron's level, but you're talking about an elite running mate. But it also gave LeBron skin in the game with this organization.
Yeah.
Like, he was actually at a place now where it's like, all right, if I don't fully commit, then it's really a bad look on me, because this team just traded away like literally everybody but Kyle Kuzma. They traded the whole damn team to make me happy. And if I'm not invested at this point, that's just a bad look on me in a city that, by the way, I want to be doing a lot of business in moving forward. It's important that I be popular in this city. Not that LeBron can't make things happen, but it's a lot harder when you're trying to do it in a city where a lot of people think of you, as a jerk. I mean, like, they really think of you as just this aloof, kind of narcissistic jerk. But, he's been fantastic this year.
Similar how people think of me.
Yes. And you know what? Nobody does business with you.
Nope.
And unlike vsliquor.com that everybody wants to do business with, the reason why is because they're the best way to get your liquor delivered right to your door, one click on its way, and first order, type in sports, Darius. That is 15% off. That first order. Cannot promise they will deliver to your neck of the woods, but you'll never know until you try.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have to use my wife's. My wife works under her maiden name for work, and we put her name in there instead of mine because they just won't deliver to me personally. I'm that much of a jerk.
Nor should they.
Quick.
They probably saw that Rice Krispie treat, and they weren't coming in anywhere near that.
I'm still kind of on the fence about that thing. A quick update on I don't know. Quick update on synonyms, since I used the word fascinated at least 13 times in the last paragraph. Other words that you can use for fascinate or fascinated: engrossed, captivated, absorbed. I am captivated by what could happen to the Lakers this playoffs. I am interested. I am enchanted. I like this one. I am beguiled, gentlemen, by what the possibilities for the Lakers. I find it beguiling. What awaits them. I am bewitched, enthralled, enraptured, transfixed, and riveted. Those are all words that I can now use instead of fascinated 14
Bewitched.
times in one sentence. I like beguiled and enraptured. Nobody uses those words in like relation
This is
to
the
sports.
equivalent of. Remember when Woj was trying to tweet around the rules?
Oh,
for his
right.
tactics?
Yes.
This is the equivalent of that.
Darius,
was
what
so
else about the playoffs do you find particularly beguiling?
Honestly, the way that the Western Conference seeding is going to play out is interesting to me.
That is
Without
beguiling.
a home court advantage, everything really then gears even more towards matchups and how things are going to go in terms of like, especially the seeding of like what 4, 5, and 6. They seem really
Right.
clumped. Will clump together. Who the Lakers are going to face in the first round, that's still an open question. Whether or not Portland is going to find a way to get into a play-in scenario. There's a lot of storylines out there out west that I'm fascinated with.
Fascinated, captivated, absorbed, enchanted,
Yes.
perhaps? Bewitched? Are you bewitched at the idea of finding out who's going to be the 4 seed? But you're right. The Clippers are not guaranteed to be the 2. They're unlikely to fall to the 4, which is really the thing that matters here. Because there's not a functional, like you say, with no home court, there's not a functional difference between 2 and 3. But obviously 3 and 4 changes things significantly. You face a different team, but you might like the team at 7 more than you like the team at 6, or vice versa, depending on how this shakes out. But there's, Denver, Utah, Oklahoma City, and Houston at 3 through 6 are separated by 2.5 games.
Where's Dallas?
Dallas is 11 back. So Dallas is, math is hard. 1.5 games behind Oklahoma City at the 5, 1.5 behind Houston at the 6. And so they could easily move up as much as to 5.
Dallas is
They're
the
a
interesting
weird
team.
Yeah.
Dallas is the interesting team to me.
Now, Darius, we have to do this for
because-
you. Let me look up some synonyms for interesting. See, now I'm in everybody's head.
I feel like because I feel like if Dallas can avoid playing the Clippers in the first round, and so if the Clippers get locked in at 2, if Dallas can find a way to move up out of 7th and into any of those other slots, I like them a fair amount to advance, especially, Denver is a team right now that doesn't have their full squad. They have not yet come together yet as a full team, and
Like
it
literally haven't come together.
They've had a bunch of guys missing. They played their all center lineup in that first scrimmage
That was
game.
amazing.
It was
That was
fantastic, right? Tall ball.
Yeah. I love it. Vogel was a little jealous of that. Because Vogel loves going big. He's looking at that going, why can't I do that?
Mike Brown is super jealous.
He's like, come on, Frank, have some balls and go tall ball. Come on, man.
Well, I said on Twitter, it reminded me of one of those early 2000s Western All-Star teams, right? Where they would throw out like Yao and Shaq and Dirk and Duncan and KG and just say, oh, go out there and play with all your big guys.
Remember when we were all clamoring in like the late 2000s to get the Kobe, what was it? It was like Kobe, Meta, like the what was the tallest lineup they could have possibly put out? It was like Kobe at the point with like Lamar, like Lamar, Ariza, Powell, and Bynum.
Yeah.
Like Kobe would be the shortest guy.
Well,
at
look, I'm willing to eat that Rice Krispie treat. I'm into gimmicks here. So it's basically like when you play Nintendo hockey and you could choose skinny guy, medium-sized guy, and fat guy.
Yeah.
And they all had their, like, it's, every once in a while you'd experiment with the 5 skinny guy lineup or the 5 fat guy lineup. You wouldn't try any variety whatsoever. That's kind of what that is. It's like, I just want to see what that looks like for 15 minutes just because. Like, it's a long season and I want to see things.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think if there's any other team out west that I think can make some noise that maybe isn't expected to. Maybe OKC?
I like OKC. I actually really do. If nothing else, you're going to hate playing. You're going to hate playing.
Let's make a poll. Who do you think are the most threatening teams? And you're excluding the Clippers here, right? That's kind of the question we're asking.
Yeah. Leave them out of this for now. Like, I don't buy into Houston. Like, I think Houston can be tricky, but the thing that makes me not buy into them is they can't really adjust the way they play. Like, whether it's working or whether it's not working, they literally can't make adjustments because of the roster setup and the restrictions that come with having, like, Robert Covington as your biggest player. Like, they can really only play one way. And if it's working, they're going to be really tricky if it's working. But if it's not working, I don't see what they can do. So I don't see what they can try.
Denver, Dallas, OKC, and Houston. Are we leaving Utah out with no Bogdanovich?
I would leave you. Yes, okay. I would leave them out. Sorry. Also, too, Mike Conley is expecting a child. And so he's going to have to leave the bubble at some point during the playoffs. They were saying that it could be like right in the middle of the first round that he could end up having to leave, and they're already a bit depleted without Bogdanovich.
Oh, right. But that's what's so weird about this. Like, everybody planned, like, a lot of, like, pro players, they plan, like, hey, honey, when do you think we should try to do this? So, like,
that's right.
The team in the middle of the playoffs, whatever. You're not supposed to have to worry about that in August or September or October. It's like, that's kind of your wiggle room area. Like, worst thing that happens, you miss a little
baby birthing time.
Right.
No, the same was true about Caruso, right? You would assume that when his sister chose a wedding date, when is Alex going to be able to be at my wedding? How about late July? That sounds like a good time to get married.
Perfect. Although, I got to be honest, like, I believe Caruso when he says, like, he's committed to this playoff run and he recognizes the opportunity in front of him and all that stuff. If I'm Caruso, I don't care how close I am to my sibling. Wedding in Texas.
An outdoor wedding in Texas? People, no, thank you.
100+ people, no social distancing? Hell no. Hell no. I like, my playoff run becomes an amazing, irrefutable excuse at that point because there's no way in hell I'm going to that thing. I don't care how close I am to my sister. Like, I will throw her the most amazing first anniversary party she's ever seen. Like, I will get her the most kick-ass gift, whatever. I'm not going anywhere.
Well, like, apparently they have, Darius said, like, sliding scale. Like, the numbers crunchers get together and they figure out, like, okay, this violation is worth X, Y, or Z as we try to figure out how long you have to stay, or, like, this, you leave the bubble for this, you got to come back and quarantine for however long. Lemon pepper flats at a strip club are apparently worth 10. Like that, that's what they came up with.
You know what Lou says? Worth every
totally
penny.
Worth it. They are named.
You can tell Lou Williams is not losing a minute of sleep over this. He's I regret
none. I mean, I gotta be honest with you too. It's like this has been one of those great moments too, where people learn. Like, there's a cultural. I mean, beyond it's not just no matter where he went, he should have carried out thing. Like, there's a cultural element to this. Like, strip clubs in Atlanta serve excellent food, and, like, people who are there know this. And so while the rest of the country were like, oh, he was at the strip club to get chicken wings, everybody in Atlanta was like, oh, no, he's at the strip club to get chicken wings.
Yeah, he's at the best place to get some wings.
In the entire city. They're named after him, for God's sake. They are named after him.
Yeah.
He's literally on the menu.
So, Andy, if lemon pepper flats is worth 10, and a wedding in Texas with 100 people with, I guess, limited social distancing, that could keep him out until like the conference finals. that could be months of quarantine.
Who knows how? I'm just happy that apparently he had a nice conversation with LeBron and AD about what he should do, and I'm guessing it was probably a very one-sided conversation.
All right, Andy, if you had to go to that wedding or eat that, what do you choose?
I'm eating that because it's simpler and quicker. And I mean, I'm assuming I'm not eating this thing in a crowd, right? I'm eating it myself. Like I don't have to.
No, I guess there's no social distancing with you in that. No.
Right. I mean, like, if I have to eat that in a crowd, I'm going to at least go to the wedding because I assume the food's better. But assuming I'm eating that thing alone, I'll just bite the bullet. But I mean, that sounds awful. Like the idea of the Caruso wedding. That being said, though, those lemon pepper flats, like just the lemon peppers down there, like I'm so intrigued now and wanting to try them. Like that is the best thing that ever happened to Magic City. Like Magic City has gotten the greatest favor,
especially now when so many things are closed. Yes. Like their carryout business must be bonkers right now. You guys want to take a guess at the poll? 130 votes. So 130 votes. Houston is winning 53%. Yeah. Who do you think second, Darius?
Dallas.
Denver, 31%, but not everyone maybe has paid attention to the fact that they only have centers.
Skinny Jokic.
That's right. Then Dallas, 15%, and OKC has like 2 votes. But I don't consider them a contender. I consider them to be like the old Memphis teams, like the real true grit and grind teams, where they probably can't advance very far, but they can beat any team in any given round, and the team that has to play them is far more likely to lose in the next round for having had to play them before. Like Memphis used to just grind teams down, and maybe they get through it, but they're so beat up that it hurts them going forward. I feel like OKC is a little bit like that. Not quite talented enough to take down a Titan kind of team, but nobody wants to play Oklahoma City. Nobody.
Can I ask you guys a question about the East? Is it Milwaukee to the finals in a walk, in your opinion?
I don't think any team that plays Toronto is a walk. I think Toronto is for real. Like, they're a really good team. They've been really good this year despite having a ton of injuries. They clearly buy into themselves. Nick Nurse is a really good creative coach. Like, I don't know for sure if without Kawhi they could overcome, the talent that is Giannis and just, the sheer force of everything Giannis brings.
Yeah.
And, Chris Middleton's no slouch himself too.
That's right.
But I am willing to bet that if Milwaukee beats Toronto, I mean, I don't have the matchups in front of me, whatever round they'd meet up in, but if they beat Toronto, it won't be easy. I would be stunned if it's easy.
Yeah, I think Toronto's in the third. I think they're the third seed.
There's still some
right
wiggle
now.
Room there, I think.
Yeah, there's potential for them to move up or down depending on what happens with Boston. I think Boston is the second seed right now, but if Kemba's knee doesn't hold up or if there's issues there.
That gets into like, how good is Kyle Lowry? How good is Van Vliet again? Can he do it again in the playoffs this year? If they get performances from those guys, or like one of the super random, Terrence Davis gives
Chris
them,
Boucher.
like gives them 3 good games, like whatever it might be. They're really good, and I still am. God, I'm going back to my synonyms here. I am engaged and spellbound by the Sixers and the possibilities of what that could be if they can. I mean, it's a lot to ask for a team to come together with a lineup change like that this quickly, but if suddenly Shake Milton at the point works, and you got Simmons at power forward, and he's actually hitting some 3-pointers like he's been doing, in the post season thing, that team is terrifying because defensively they're great, or can be.
Well, Tobias Harris as well. So when we were talking earlier about the potential to have, like, for the Lakers to have 2 of the top 3 players in any given game or in any given series, you could say the same thing about Philly out west, right?
Absolutely.
When you have Embiid and Simmons at well, at the top of that roster. And then when you back them up with a Tobias Harris and then an Al Horford, and their defensive potential, that they can be a scary team if they actually do coalesce in a way that they weren't able to during the regular season.
I just think it's great. Like it's really competitive up and down. I do not think it's a walk for any of the top teams to get to the final.
Well, I mean, okay, we keep talking about the 8th seed and the possibilities there, and like Memphis versus. I mean, New Orleans, I think, is just the most fun, just because there's the most built-in storylines. Even if AD doesn't end up going down in New Orleans, and the kid, the former Laker kids don't go to Staples Center. I mean, there's still a lot of built-in drama. But like, if Portland gets that 8th seed, that means by definition they're crushing it.
Yeah.
Because the mathematics in front of them to actually get that 8th seed are really hard. Yep. So it means that, putting in Nurkic, putting in Zach Collins, Melo has found a way to, if nothing else, be passable defensively at the 3. And, Skinny Melo is putting up some efficient points, whatever. I don't want any part of that team. Like, I don't think the Lakers would lose to them. But my God, Damian Lillard in close games in the fourth quarter, I think he's scarier than anybody in the league.
Team West, they went to the Western Conference Finals last year. It's not like you have to go back very far to remember when Portland was good. Oh, did Darius freeze?
That's where not having Avery Bradley might actually be an issue, right? Like when you look at the Lakers, I think that they have so many answers for pretty much any opponent that they're going to face. But the playoffs come all the way back to what are your weaknesses and can your opponent exploit them? And I think that of all of the potential 8 seed teams, it is it is Portland that has the ability to sort of put stress on where the Lakers are weakest in terms of point of attack, defense. Terry Stotts is a very creative offensive coach, and he's going to put those guys in positions to threaten you on that side of the ball. Now, would they be able to defend LeBron and AD? That's where things get tricky, and that's why no one in their right mind would be picking the Blazers over the Lakers should they meet in the first round, but they're definitely a scary opponent for sure.
We'll just update the poll here real quick. While we do that, Darius, where we are right now, who wins? Like if you had to pick. You got the Lakers?
The championship?
Uh-huh.
I mean, I'm going to go with the homer pick, and I'm just going to say the Lakers.
This is a man who knows the audience at the very least.
He's a man who wants to continue having people listen to the Laker Film Room podcast, continue reading Forum Blue and Gold, following him on @Forum Blue Gold. Darius knows what's up. It's not his first day.
Do you like Kobe? So Houston, 48.5%. OKC rounds out at 5%. Dallas at 15%. Denver at 31%. So not a ton of movement there. And then a couple write-in votes for teams like Portland. Dude, this was a lot of fun, and
it was.
I think a great we haven't Andy and I do a lot of shenanigans and nonsense on this show. We haven't had just a hardcore nerdy Lakers basketball hour in a while. This is
cool. We're not disciplined enough to be
we're really
totally
not
honest
at all.
We have the attention span of gnats. It's very difficult to keep us on the rails and dialed in like that, but Darius, you're capable, so thank you.
I found your commentary truly beguiling, and I hope we can do this again. I was captivated, I was enchanted, I was engrossed by all of it.
If I'm on again, I want to see you actually eat the thing.
I got to out of context. That's awful.
If you were tuning in late,
for reference point, that's the thing.
You watch the whole show.
You got to watch the whole show, but I don't want to ever hear you say that to me without context. I want to see you eat the thing. That's not okay. Still a family show. Darius Soriano, Foreign Blue and Gold. Thank you so much for doing this. This was awesome.
Thanks, brother.
We will
Appreciate
see
it,
you
man.
soon.
Thanks for having
Best to you
me
and your
on.
family. Everybody be safe out there.
Tomorrow, Harrison Sanford.
Yes, Harrison Sanford. That's right. That's fun.
From Behind the Green Room, the Danny Green podcast.
Ah,
yeah.
that's a
So,
cool
Look at us.
his co-host.
Look at us pulling in
Yeah.
people. All right.
Yeah, we can ask Harrison, why is Danny so hard to transcribe?
Oh, we absolutely are going to ask him that
Oh,
question.
I know I'm going to ask him that.
See everybody tomorrow.